All right, so this is like a little bit unhinged. This is not a normal time when I usually do these readings or either like kind of in like the morning-ish, like late morning or at night. And this is right now in my time, it's about like it's 3:40. So I have a bunch of energy for this. And one of the reasons or like one of the things that makes this such a sustainable thing for me to do is that this is part of my own practice is processing this as I reread it and um, doing my own work as it relates to this practice. And so yeah. And in this so one of the things I'll say is that the refinement of this is, there's the kind of shock and awe is what I'd call it, is when folks get the book, there tends to be this kind of like, "Oh my godness" to it. And I'll show you, this is a copy of the book. It is large. It is think if you don't have it yet, it is cookbook size. It's cookbook size. Now, with that in mind, consider that most of these readings, we are going through about a page to a page and a half. It's kind of like it's probably the most reasonable expectation to have with the book is that you would read it, complete it for the first time in a year. It's not that you need to read it cover to cover. It does work that way, but it can also be like a divining type of thing where you open it and read, sort of, like even asking a question to yourself, to the universe, to God, to whatever, and opening the book and seeing where your eyes naturally fall. Looking at the table of contents and understanding sort of the map of the book, which is part one, is like an orientation and an overview where there can be a pretty decent amount of value derived from it, but also it's a slow go. It's evocative. People, universally find just reading chapter one to be a lot and also to be really valuable. Alone, just the first page. Some people have told me that, that they began to, that there were tears and a lot of emotion and feeling. And, there have been people who are, like considered to be highly academic, who are used to consuming a lot of content, who, like one story I tell is someone who's like, "Hey, I want to push our meeting out so I can read the entire book." And I was thinking, wow, I'm impressed by that. If that were possible, I'm really interested in people that are capable of doing that. But and then when we showed up, they were like, I read the first chapter and it kind of blew me out, and I had it like sort of it did a lot of shifting that I had to reconcile. And also, and they also said they were a bit nervous to continue reading, because of how evocative and like how much transformation and like in their thinking was getting, like there was some disruption happening and sort of reshifting. And so with that being said, it's one of the reasons that I'm reading this on these YouTubes, on these videos, these streams, is to be a companion for that experience, because to read it alone, to hear it, for me to discuss it, for you to think about it, for us to exchange, like thoughts on it, you to give me your feedback. It's a living practice. And so the book, holding it up here, is a book for a life. It's not like in a, and also it, if especially with a lot of the constructs of sort of getting through things, um, like the idea of like a start to finish, it's like this kind of, like I'm in this process too right now with you. Like I'm finding deeper releases and deeper levels of freedom and deeper levels of ascension and deeper levels of my relationship with myself. And that unfolding is continuing to yeah, it's just continuing, and the thing is that if this were a chore, if there was a sense that I needed to make myself better or improve myself, I would say this is that would be an example of the, sort of the use, like the Guy Donahue thing about like you use a log to traverse the river and it becomes an alligator. It's very organic for me to really be connecting with this and like having this sense of wanting this continued opening and deepening and really the like really just like one small release of the tangle associated with the kind of like the parinama tangle, which I'll just revisit quickly, is that it's like our early, and this is in the parinama for beginners 4-week class, and I'll be running another one of those probably starting at the end of August. Probably I'll release the dates for that soon. By the way, if you're interested in attending and you haven't if you're interested in attending and you haven't, sign up for on the parinama.com, the parinamamethod.com, join the community, sign up there, and you'll receive notifications when the class is about to start. So the tangle, so that our early experiences and circumstances shape reflexes within us, that these reflexes, we create beliefs and rationalizations for them that create this, like, wind up creating this sense of like what reality is. And then that reality is projected out into the world, and that projection is reflected back. And then that kind of tightens the tangle because it creates this validation that these reflexes, which were essentially adaptations to circumstances that are, for the most part, no longer happening, um, those reflexes become considered more true, like that, like, of course that's how the world is, so this is how we must respond to them. So I was saying something, I'm sure it was incredibly brilliant, but it's kind of like, oh, the practice. So yeah, so that's the practice. Like the practice is to just kind of like stay in it, and it starts to integrate, and the deepening of what it feels like to be alive. The only reason to do this is not because there's something wrong with you that needs to be fixed. Truth, like, really, I mean, maybe that's something that really is familiar. I mean, as it is with, like, like, as a phenomenon, it really is more about this continued access to a greater feeling of being alive and being a human being and having this experience. It's really about that. And if just one little loosening happens in the process, it's worth the price of admission. It is worth the price of admission. It just needs to be one little bit of a sense that it's like it's kind of, what's the word for, you're breaking the illusion of the tangle being reality. And any little thing we can do that shows that there is that this whole the tangle is malleable, and the trust. And so in Parinama for beginners, the second week is all about beginning to our, like, to really, the long pull in the tent here is our relationship with ourself and our trust, having this like beginning to, and this is what one of the things we're doing is we're building our trust in ourselves brick by brick, kind of rebuilding it, strengthening it, expanding it, developing it, making it more dynamic, and that it's just infinitely available in this process. So that is something where, as far as how this goes, I mean, one of the other things that as a human being, for my own understanding, like how this works is I need to show up for this and respect that folks have their own processes that they ebb and flow in and out of. So, there are people that just have different seasons, just have, like, different capacities. Will come in and, like, get a little bit out of it and then kind of move away as they process it, maybe are overwhelmed, but a seed's been planted. A seed has been planted that there is a way, that there is a way towards greater freedom, there's a way towards greater aliveness, there's a way towards a better like, a greater relationship with ourselves, and that is one of the things about, even talking about, like, living from the inside out, is that when we're relying on other people, their validation, they're living their lives, and what we're doing matters as it relates to destinies that are not part of, like, our domain. It's like the popularity of something that you're doing, kind of rides in an ebb and flow of something that's greater than oneself. And that, even the notion that it's like popularity of this could create some form of validation in it is, it's not really for me to decide. The only thing I can decide is my relationship with it and how I'm showing up in it. And to caveat that, how much, like, really, like, with my aspiration for wanting greater access to this for people, is to show up in the ways where I'm continuing to iterate, where I'm steering in that general direction. But, you see a lot of people, it's, like, not uncommon where people feel betrayed by folks who are not backing them or and there's sometimes it surprises me where people will, in my own life, have, been kind of ambivalent or distant or not really, like, backed me up or promoted what I'm doing, and, that's part of my own understanding of this very principle that is, like, something that's like, "Oh, I already understood this," and it's like, "Oh, yeah, that's something to see," you know? It's like that every person's, kind of, like, in their process, and how we it's really on ourselves to show up. So, with that being said, let's do some reading. Let's do some reading. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, if you feel that, just put a little heart in the comment if anything in that, like, resonates with you. So I one thing as a follow-up to the reading that I did this morning, the giving, generosity. There are 2 books that are in referenced in that section. There's the bibliography that's contained in the book, but for folks who don't have the book, who are following along, there's the Anais Nin quote, but, it's kind of a standalone thing. It's probably I actually didn't look that up in the bibliography, but so Adam Grant, so the book Give and Take, Adam Grant. So if you're looking up that book, that's a place to look, Adam Grant. And he travels mostly in kinda like the business tech. I think he's at, Penn. What is their business school? He's a professor of some sort. He's a relatively young guy. Pretty prolific. His work's pretty, in by my estimation, kind of uneven, but he's got some, I've read almost, in the process of writing a book, I read most of what his books, and, um, yeah, I mean, like, anybody who's producing a lot as it would be. But, but one of the things just a note that so his notion of, like, giving being a quality of people are both high performing and low performing, which I read, watched the last video. The other thing that he was the only person that of, kind of actually the only person I've seen or I've read who really built a case around the need for stability before taking risks is, in his book Originals. Highly recommend that book. I actually wouldn't recommend reading Give and Take. I'd recommend reading Originals. Fantastic book. Fantastic book about what it really means to take the risks of entrepreneurship, and specifically talks about how, I think it was the founders of Warby Parker, how much they had to wait for the right time when they had some stability, like financially, and personally, before, like, venturing. Important. Very first hub. Very pull yourself up by the bootstraps, which is that, like, we need to have this sense of safety and solidity and security and consistency before we can jump off. So that's a really good book. The other is the Gabor Mate book, and Gabor Mate, so the book that I read maybe twice. There's as I reread this book, I'm reminded by how many books I read and how many books I read multiple times. I say sometimes I would say like the canon, which is the, top 20 books, and that by 20 I just mean the ones I read more than once. I read about 300 books in doing this. Asterisk, if that sounds impressive, it is. I usually read about 2 or 3 books a year. It's a whole other thing I could get into about the fact that it's like when there's something that you're supposed to do and you feel called to, the way kind of finds its way. So Gabor Mate, in the realm of Hungry Ghosts, he has written quite a bit. He's a medical doctor who had a practice in somewhere, I think like Toronto or Ontario. I think it was in Canada, in an area with like a extraordinarily high level of substance issues, like of addiction. So he writes a beautiful book about addiction. And it's really useful. Like, some people are kind of like get activated by him paralleling his basically like a shopping addiction for buying music to people with like substance abuse issues. But like reading it, I really think it's really important, because what he's talking about is pacifiers, which again we talk about in Party Number for Beginners. It's also at the end of the chapter 5, which is like what we reach for as a substitute to comfort ourselves, and to really see the innocence, the inherent innocence in these needs, the deep set needs that we have. So yeah. And also the one of the things too that's referenced in the give section, which is like what I just finished, is that Erik Erikson, the developmental psychologist, who talks about the stage of development that matches up with the fourth hub, is industry versus inferiority. And even just doing like sort of a light Google search on that and reading about that and considering the role of contributing in our development, and how that, like, the dignity associated with contribution. I mean, this stuff, like, one of the reasons this gets kind of like dangerous or whatever, like, has concepts, is it really goes up against the idea that, people are lazy and they don't want to work, and that all they want is a handout. But I'd counter that. I think people who who like sort of have those behaviors tend to, for the most part, suffer from like exhaustion, mental health, um, trauma. It's human nature. Like, it's really human nature to want to contribute. And I think that's one of the pains, is that it's like, so-called laziness, like the underlying like guilt with that, shame. whatever. So, okay. So here we are, 20 minutes. Here we go. Yeah, some people put like timestamps where they say like, yeah, here's when we really get into it, or like here's the so maybe someday. Not today. Here we go. Okay, so receive gratitude. And once again, we're talking about the two sides of the same coin. And the thing is like, just for reframing this, the last reading was about giving and generosity, and now we're talking about receiving and gratitude. Gratitude. Now, the narrative, and I'm repeating myself because it's worth repeating, is that there's this thing where it's like the givers are the good guys, the givers are virtuous, and the receivers and takers and are, the baddies, that like they're the selfish and that the givers sleep well at night and the takers, the fact that there's like a like derogatory term, like or like, I mean, taker is a word that sort of has no, alone is kind of like okay, but it's like that it has this kind of inference that it's like, like a taker. But if you're going to give, you need a receiver. You need a taker. It's like holding out your gift and just dropping it on the floor if there isn't another hand to reach out and receive it. It's like it's an exchange. And so here's the thing that we get into, and I'm going to read the balance part, at least that's what I plan to do, is that giving and receiving, this is back into this balanced, like the balance of love, the balance, this balance that if whatever inclination you have, if you are like, it's like, I love giving. I'm a giver. And it's kind of like, floating around and it's like, I give and that's my thing. And, it's like, you don't have enough. We'll get into that. All I do is give. And it's like, and this kind of narrative of like how virtuous that is, and how unjust a world is that like wouldn't just like, if you're just giving more than you have, that like, what a terrible world, versus the responsibility for being able to receive. Because receptivity is something that is a capacity. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. I've got, it's yes, yes, yes. Thank you. I love money. I love gifts. I love receiving. I'm grateful. This is wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. There's no and so like people are like, I give, and the receiving is so tiny that it's like pushing something through a little pinhole. And then it's like angry that it's like, why am I not receiving more? It's like, how receptive, how deserving, how much do you enjoy the receiving? Like, thank you. Thank you is like a vote for like, yes, I'd love more of that. Thank you. Thank you. So let's get there. Let's go there. Oh, so here's the thing. Love. So whichever one you have the inclination for, if you're like, you know what, like you're our receiver, you're somebody that's like, you know, it's like, ooh, like more and more and more. Whichever is the intake or the outtake, whichever is the one that is the more difficult, that is the area where when you expand the capacity, you have an exponential ability and capability for love. Loving yourself in the exchange, loving others in the exchange. It's a flow. It's a flow. All right. So receiving without expressing appreciation is appropriate in the earliest years of life. So as we enter the developmental stage of the fourth hub, sharing through a balance of taking along with giving is now developmentally appropriate. and part of successful socialization. In the earliest years of life, when it isn't possible for an infant or baby to express gratitude, mature parents must constantly quash the recoil from exhausting work that lacks appreciation. An attentive parent of a new baby will be attuning to signals and anticipating needs, asking for nothing in return except the health and safety of their infant. Adults who didn't experience this early in their lives may crave this proactive, intuitive attention by expecting other adults to anticipate their needs. Even having tantrums or giving the silent treatment. As mature adults, we must use words to assist people to give us what we need. Once we've grown, having people guess is no longer reasonable or appropriate. This is also something very important as far as feeling on pins and needles in relationships with other people. Noticing if people aren't taking responsibility for expressing their needs and blaming you for not guessing them, and also the fear that you're not reading the tea leaves about other people's needs. I mean, there's a reasonable sort of thing where it's like, okay, it's like showing up in, just being like attentive, but also not having the pressure of being like, I'm supposed to guess. It's just like, nope, I'm going to express myself. I'm going to be open to hearing what people have to say and ask for. Maybe even prompting them, say, is there anything you need? Somebody goes, "No, I'm good," and it's like a whole thing. It's like, that's not on you. Like the thing of taking that on, like that's something. It's a whole thing. It's a whole thing. So many folks find receiving more difficult than giving. Even people who are chronic takers tend to lack capacity for gratitude, which is the core of receiving. Although giving can be an act of power, truly receiving requires strength and vulnerability. We may repeatedly give to people while they take and take without appreciation or the desire to reciprocate. Takers have difficulty feeling when they are receiving. To receive means that we fully experience and embrace an act of generosity. Hmm. That felt nice. Oops. My little mallet fell over. Boo. Okay, so the issue at hand for folks who struggle with low self-worth or have experienced significant interruptions in the fourth hub isn't whether they are lovable or whether love exists, even though this may feel like a reasonable concern. Instead, the issue is the capability for allowing, receiving, and appreciating the love that surrounds you. Dissatisfaction with what is available or with what is being given is a protective adaptation that conceals a lack of trust in receiving. If we cannot tune into the generosity of a kind word or a small act of service or gift, we're restricting what we can receive. It simply doesn't matter how much we're given if we cannot allow ourselves to feel we're receiving it. Receive that. It's for you. A nice note for you. So, yeah, for you. So, to have a direct experience with the energetic underpinning of giving and receiving, try giving to someone who shows no appreciation and pay attention to the response of your body mind. Pay attention to how that feels to give to someone who does not receive. Someone who takes, is not grateful. What does that feel like? What does that feel like? So then try giving to someone who's deeply appreciative and feel the natural response of wanting to provide more. They're inviting you in. It's like when someone fails to receive and appreciate what you give, There is recoil and reflective reluctance to give more. It is a rejection. It's rejection. So to give to someone and have them go, meh, it's a rejection. To give to someone who's grateful and receives as an acceptance. So you're like, one's inability to receive is just constantly offering rejections to people and like the world and what wants to be given to us. It's a protection. It's a protection. There's a reason that it's done. It's a reason it's done because it's very, very, very innocent. I think it's like, I think it was in the last video, is like, just take yourself to this little you and take yourself to the shock of being embarrassed or teased. The shock. It's a shock the first time it happens. And think about the protection that builds around that. Think about it. Think about that protection. This is what you're protecting. This little sweet, look at that sweet face. That little face. You think of like, that's the adaptation is formed because there's the love in us, the protection, to be vulnerable, to receive. It's like, okay, so I'm going to reread this. When someone fails to receive and appreciate what you give, there is recoil and reflexive reluctance to give more. Appreciation and gratitude are universal signals for wanting more. Lack of appreciation is a universal signal of wanting less. Pay attention to how you react and consider how this reflects what's happening around you all the time in ways both large and small. If you want more love, money, and attention, get excited about the smallest possible signs of it in your life. Send the message of more, please. Please, please, more. Thank you. Yeah. If you feel that, like, put a little heart in the comments. I'll give you a heart back. Yes, I will. Here. So this also works with generosity. So just like gratitude, there is an operating principle in which giving sends an activating signal. If you want money, find a way to give some. It doesn't need to be a lot, just enough to feel that tiny pinch of discomfort that's often an unspoken part of being generous. If it's attention you want, pay attention to someone else instead of waiting for it. Send a note, a text, or make a call. If you want people to smile at you, smile at them. Smiling at you. It's like transmitting a signal to the world. When you want love, you need to send a little bit out in your actions, although this may feel a little unfair. This is a little bit. honestly, especially because the people who need money and love the most tend to have so little. There's a reminder that giving and receiving is like a wheel that sometimes needs a little push to get going. And I take a breath with that. So I remember in high school, I had a friend, Brad. It was etched in my memory that in his house, hi Katie, guest guest star, sweet boy here. He wants more food, but I just fed him. Had this embroidered like picture. It was like in a frame, and it said, "The people who need love the most are the ones who deserve it the least." And so this is the part of this where I say it's a little unfair. And I think Luke needs love right now. Don't you, Katie? Do you want to come up? Did you want to come up? Sweet boy? Oh, you're so nice. He's so nice. Is that, and this is the part that's hard, is that people who are angry and hurt project that into the world and it's reflected back. And once again, in the tangle, it like validates this like way of living. And so I'm just gonna pin that as a note, because it is so sad, because there are people who have experienced so little and so much pain, that how like this principle of being able to give a little bit when there's just this sense of like just incredible protection. I mean, back to here, everyone has this. And how intensely did this need to be protected? So we have people that show up who are so difficult, and just, I mean, even just introducing small amounts of just awareness. I'm not even going to say compassion just yet. Just, before we get into like, okay, sort of like how, like, what's our role in that? We're not there yet. We're not there yet. This is one of the backwards things where it's like, how do you fix everyone else? It's like, first, inside first. Yeah, that's an agreement. He's like, me first. He is me first. This boy is a me first, and he's, my little guru cat. So I'm going to read this last little part on balance, and then I'm going to concede to his demands, whatever those might be. So, balance here. So, natural balance is not an accounting practice. So if we need to repair an imbalance, we may need to engage in conscious acts that temporarily resemble keeping score. However, the goal is a naturally occurring homeostatic style balance that stays within a comfortable range and self-corrects to remain level. So the thing is, it's like, it's not an accounting practice, but if it is like we are a chronic giver and receiving in a relationship, in a work dynamic, in whatever, it may be of like, oh, this is so cute. There's like little kids getting wheeled by. They're so cute. So there really may be a practical aspect when we're talking about like the turning of the wheel, is that that we may need to like create some momentum by becoming very conscious about like the counterforce to the dynamic of this that we're already like kind of at, like sort of over corrected for or whatever. I don't know that. Okay, so are you ready for the last of this? I think Luke is definitely ready for the last of this. God. Hey. All right. Wait, where was I? Okay. So when giving and taking operate as a complementary opposite principle, they are healthy and relatively balanced. See chapter 3. That's in part 1. So when we have a healthy, balanced capacity in our hubs, we can naturally feel when we need more or sense an arising impulse to contribute. Knowing we are worthy makes asking for what we need a grateful practice, and with boundaries, being asked for something we cannot give is not a threat. We simply say no. We simply say no. And the key with simply saying no is that the no is not loaded. It's not resentful. It's not angry whenever possible. That when we are regulating our emotions and our energy, that we are very aware of where we are at and realize that in terms of communication, our ability to actually say that no, like the voltage load behind it is going to mean a spectrum of different things when we can simply say no from a point of loving ourselves and realizing we don't have it to give. It's just a no. It's just a no. It's not a betrayal. It's not a lack of ability. It's not a lack of ability. What else? It's not a betrayal. It's not. Yeah. This is living from the inside out. And the thing is that the capacity to love ourselves, as in the second hub, we talk about the ability to say when something is enough, that this is an expression of love. So just to say no, can't do it. Okay, so that is it for right now. Thank you for coming along. I'm really, really appreciative of you. And it really is nobody's watching this right now. So just to be clear, I'm speaking to future you. There's future you. Hi, future you. I love you. And there's also something that's kind of like, I was thinking about this as I was walking today, which is that there's something interesting that I've already integrated, which is putting this much of myself out into an anonymous place where anybody could watch this. Truly anybody with any level of relationship to me, positive, negative, or otherwise. And yeah, and what it took to get to this, like the process of getting to the place where the thing that matters to me, like this, this kind of notion of like defensiveness is now, has left the building. Okay. So thank you for watching. Interacting, I will say it matters so much to me. The comments on this, Mira, you get the shout out. Thank you. Comments here on the video mean a great deal to me. I love seeing them. I love interacting with them. People do individually, privately reach out to me. I understand sometimes people have questions that they want to ask. But it's also really helpful to put them in here because if I answer them so sometimes people ask me the same thing. Then then maybe there's other people, the questions you're asking, there are other people that would benefit. from, whatever it is. But anyway, yeah. Yeah, that's it for now, and we'll see what Luke wants. I'm sending you lots of love. Bye now.